bright blue sky and fluffy white cloud day. Today's topic will be currants, specifically red currants, which I picked today. So, in the spirit of bringing you along for the things that are happening right now, I'll be making this short video. Right here, we have two young red currant bushes. They were propagated by me from a single cutting several years ago. I think that it was 4 years ago, and this is their 5th year. So 5 years ago they were still a part of another plant, and then I took a cutting and stuck it in the soil. It rooted during the growing season, and in autumn I transplanted it, and then it grew from there. You can see that they're still small and compact. Each of them has about 6 or 7 stems. Those are the newest, last year's stems. This year this bush hasn't made any new offshoots, but it grew on the tips of many of its branches. It's similar here. So we have those bushes at about 1 meter height and maybe similar width, and I just picked them clean, almost left a few berries here and there for the birds, and the result is this bowl of red currants. Most of them are perfectly ripe, and I just measured it, and it's 1 kilo almost precisely. So two little 4-year bushes can easily yield a kilo of currants. And keep in mind that after the first year of rooting, those two, they were not watered unless there was rain, and maybe they were watered only once in August, in a very dry year when there was much heat stress. You can usually see the leaves wilting, and you know it's good to supply just a bit of water, maybe 20 liters per bush, just so they don't drop their leaves prematurely, and they can have a good fruit bud set for next year. I'll show you the other two bushes we have. They are not still picked, so you can compare. So those are our two other bushes. They are of the same age. One of them, this one is probably 1 year older, but I'm not exactly sure because the cuttings propagation area is not labeled in any way. So I mainly judge them by growth and size. I apologize for the very contrast intensive light, but it's summer here, so that's what we get, sunny days. You can see that they have very good fruit set, but you have to keep in mind that those 4 bushes, which are essentially clones, they are not of some named variety, and I know that selected varieties that are offered, especially in Europe, they have certain benefits. For example, those flower and then fruit clusters, they are with more flowers on them, more fruit. Ours then they don't get as large, but you can see here those are some of the best I picked. Maybe 10 fruit per cluster. And also the selected varieties, there are earlier and later varieties, and those that ripen all at once and those that ripen gradually. Our clones, our variety, which we call wild because we don't know the exact source of it, it ripens gradually, so the uppermost fruit on the cluster was ready to harvest like a week ago, and gradually all the fruits on a cluster ripen. You sometimes you get those clusters where the bottom fruit are not perfectly ripened, but a couple of days in that bowl where I picked them are enough. You can see here that this one is tied to a stick in the ground because the kids were playing football the other day and the ball smashed into the bush, and I think that it maybe broke a bit of the main stem, but it's a very healthy plant. Those stems here, 1 2 3 4 5 new very vigorous new shoots produced this year, so I'm pleased with those. It's partly because we got some rain this late spring, as it should have been the previous years, but we had very dry springs in the last 3 or 4 years ago. And those are the blackcurrant bushes. They are certainly 1 year older than the red currants, and it shows they're more than 50 centimeters taller and wider. They were moved here 2 years ago, and those two have settled now and producing new growth down here. Sadly, they don't have much fruit on them because when they were blooming, we got about 10 days of very low temperatures and lots of rain and windstorms, so there was almost no pollination. I'm happy that we still have some, and it's already beginning to ripen. It will be ready in maybe 10 days. But you can see the clusters, they have very few fruit on them, and some which I removed have none or just a single fruit. That's not really a problem, but to offset for such events, and I expect the weather to become more and more erratic with time, we just plan to have more of those bushes. So the general idea with the orchard is to have a couple of bushes between each of the fruit trees, each two of the fruit trees at the first or the southern row. So we have 2 red currants, then 2 black, then down lower again 2 red, the ones that I picked, and further still down 2 black currants and 2 red, but those are very young, so they don't produce for now, maybe next year. And down there I have space for more currants, which I'll show you now. So this is where it all begins. Those little sticks in the ground are cuttings from the growing tips of the black currants I showed you a moment ago. They were stuck in the soil directly. Here's a drip line, but we haven't irrigated yet this year. And they're just stuck in the ground 2 or 3 buds in. And those of them who develop leaves, creating roots as well. Some of them don't manage to do so, like this one. You can see I stuck 3 or 4 buds in the soil, but this one didn't root, and those other did. They will grow more in the second half of the summer, and by the autumn they'll be about this big. This is a cutting which was a similar stick last year. I planted it out. It grew to about here, and all the other leaves and branches this year's growth. So this is what I call an year zero, because it's just a cutting and it's still rooting. And this is what I call a first year. This is a first year growth on a rooted plant. Those are black currants and those are red currants, and I alternate the years. So each year I put in the soil a dozen or 2 dozen cuttings of black currants, and the next year red currants, and etc. So those red currants will be ready to give away in autumn, or continue our row of currants along in the orchard. In this same area we have 2 plants of white currants. Those are almost ready. They need maybe a week more. They ripen at about the same time as the black currants and after the red ones, so it's nice to have them in sequence. They are currently suffering from a very small insect similar to mite, but I don't treat them in any way. I kind of hope that if the plant can survive here, it will. So they have grown very well. Those are third-year plants. At first they were the little sticks, and then the single rooted cutting with some branches, and then they put out shoots of their own. You can see this has like 6 stems, and now on the third year they are already flowering and fruiting. So those will be the one to also put in the orchard. We'd like to have a variety of berries, and I also have not a single one that was given to me, like a 2-year-old plant, which should have golden yellow or amber colored berries or currants, but it still hasn't fruited yet. So I'm hoping next year it will, so I can see and try the fruit, and if it's good I also propagate that and fill another spot in the row. You can see the little chicks coming to visit again. They are getting braver and braver. I'm standing here at the edge of the vegetable garden. Those are the garlic plants before me, and I wanted to show you how the currant bushes sit between the fruit trees. In nature, those currants, they work well on edges, forest edges, as well as understory in forest clearings or along some pathways in the forest. So they work well with half shade and the dappled shade the trees provide. In the next years I'll be working towards lifting the crowns a bit, so removing those lowermost branches. But generally I want to be able to pick the currants without the need to get up on a chair, or to just be able to pick them from the ground. and also the kids should be able to reach the top branches. So that's how in the future we'll continue this row. We have 10 fruit trees in this row, so we have 9 spaces, and already planted out 3 sets of 2 red currants and 2 sets of 2 black currants, and I'm planning on white, golden, and then another red or another black currant. Those bushes can easily yield up to 3 to 4 kilograms per bush when they get a bit larger and they have a few more stems. So that should be enough for now, but in the more distant future we are planning to make a hedge out of those up in the field where our community garden is, but I'll be talking about that in another video. When I talked with a friend about my plans to run pasture hens here in the orchard, he was worried that the hens could be eating the black currants, which will be making like a kind of a hedge-like fashion here in that row, as I just explained. But I don't really have a problem with birds eating the lower hanging fruit, because currants are great nutrition, not just for human, but also for the hens. So the what we perceive as a problem here, the birds eating the currants, is actually an impulse to act in the same direction and just have more currants. So there is enough not just for the birds to eat and to be healthy, but for us as well. And those currants, they have seeds, which are a preferred food also for the birds, and it's beneficial for them. And the birds will keep any pest pressure low, because we do have some insect pest on the black currants and the red currants so far. It's an insect that bores a hole into the main stem, so at some point the whole stem dries up, and I just remove it. But it would be better to have some control on that biologically. So I hope that the presence of birds here will be beneficial both ways.